This is a description of Loka, which is a 14-layer model, which describes the realms, mental realms in which people can exist. Um, from ground zero, there are totally 6, 7 layers up, including the ground layer of evolution or development. And there are 7 layers down of, if you call it devolution or lack of development, there are 7 layers. So there are totally 14 what they call lokas, which has loka means place. In this case, it's a mental or metaphorical place in which, or a state in which a human being resides. So, for the purpose of our model, instead of 14 layers, we are taking the ground layer and 6 layers above and 6 layers below and compressing 2 of the layers into 1 layer. And then if you did that, we are able to have a mirror image of each layer corresponding to either up or down. So if there is a up layer and there is a corresponding down layer, and which has almost similar characteristics, but it lacks something specific. So totally our model, Loka model, has 13 layers, a ground layer and 6 layers above, and mirror of these 6 layers down, totally 6 plus 6 plus 1, 13 layers. So we start off with the survival layer. The survival layer, as you see, is characterized by ability to survive. Let's say somebody doesn't have the intellectual capacity, they are retarded, they are like an IQ of less than 75, then or 70, the government or people around them help them survive, right? So let's say people who don't have education or literate, there are apparently more than 20 million people in the United States who are illiterates. And then, or they don't have any special skills, like, they can't sing, a special talent to sing, as uniquely, etc. Then they they develop the talent to sing or piano or whatever. Then they are in the illiterate, and then they are in the survival layer. The survival layer is basically that human beings at this level can barely survive, can eat, work, and then sleep, and then procreate, and so forth, right? So they are, a large amount of population lives in that, throughout the world, lives in that layer. So these guys are not literate, they don't have the fortune of education, basic education, and so forth. Now, the next layer, up and down, so like I said, each layer has a corresponding mirror image, and therefore the up layer has what is called competition layer. And I call the mirror layer down, corresponding as competition prime layer. So what is needed for going up or down is what is called a drive. So not only you should have the capacity to compete, but you should have the drive to compete. Then you go to the layer, competition up, right? But there's one caveat there. It's not enough that you have the desire to compete, but you must remove a small sense of self, in that you must acknowledge that there are other human beings and they have needs too, like you do, and therefore you navigate, their needs as well, and then you can reasonably be successful. So you're in the competition layer if you not only have the drive to compete but also be able to remove a part of yourself, which is basically the ability to empathize or understand that there are other people with needs. Then you can um, be in the competition. So one another caveat is that you could still have the um, capacity to compete, but you can still might not have the desire to compete. So you might still be in ground zero, which is the survival layer. So you just don't do anything, even though you're capable. You don't have the desire. It's not that you don't have the skills, you don't have the desire. So you got to understand that. So you must have the drive to succeed or drive to compete to go to that the next layer, which is the competition layer. However, if you don't have the if you don't remove the self, that is the understanding other people have needs, then you're going to go into competition prime, even though you have the desire to succeed or desire to compete. So you have what is called the competition layer up above the existence or the survival layer, and the competition prime layer, which is below, right beneath the survival layer. Now, once you're in the competition layer, so let's say most people, college educated people, can be in that competition layer. Like I said, somebody might not be interested in at all. It's like a tiny sliver of population might be still in survival. And then people who are in this competition prime, because they have the desire to succeed, to compete, but they didn't remove the part of themselves to be able to include other people's needs, then they can get obsessed with things, right? By virtue of their non-success, if you will. I don't want to call it failure, non-success. And therefore, they can get obsessed with things like shopping, things like sex, things like socialization, things like substance, or they might be obsessed with truth, finding the truth without regard to anything at all. Case in point is there is a character in the TV show called Dr. House. He falls into the competition prime layer. So he has the drive to succeed, he has the competence to succeed, but he is not interested in removing or even understanding that there is another person or other people are there and they have needs. And then by virtue of this, he's obsessed with finding the truth of each case that come into his hospital, and then he's just stuck in that competition prime layer. In Sanskrit, it's called the Athala layer, and there are corresponding Sanskrit names. I'm not going to go with all of that. And the competition layer is where, in the same TV show, Dr. Lisa Cuddy, she competes. She knows that other people have needs, and she's in the competition layer, right? So she doesn't have any kind of obsession, etc. Now, if you're in the competition layer, like I said, each layer, if you were to traverse up or down, there must be some kind of a drive which will take you up or down. So the drive which takes you up from competition into the next layer called the mastery layer is rigor. So let's say a person has a lot of rigor, and then he must remove going up, he must remove something of himself. So in this case, he removes the him from the equation. That is, He's not looking at it as he's got a perfect objective viewpoint. He's very, very objective. Also, he has regard to other people's perspective. So these two things. So if he removes these two things, which is his subjectivity as well as accommodating other people's viewpoint, then and you add rigor to that, then you end up in the mastery layer. Like I said, there is a mirror layer down below called the mastery prime layer. Mastery prime layer is simply achieved by rigor and objectivity to some degree. You might have objectivity, might or might not, but if you did not regard other people's viewpoint, then you end up in mastery prime. So the archetypes we can give is the for mastery layer is the famous scientist Richard Feynman. So he has the rigor, he has the objectivity, he considers other people's viewpoints, for instance, in his work. Socially, it could be different. Therefore, he's at that mastery level. However, in the fictional character Sheldon in the TV show Big Bang Theory corresponds to mastery prime. Why? He's got the rigor, he's got the objectivity, but he doesn't regard other people's viewpoints at work. I mean, we're not even talking about, socially. And also, most of the TV shows about the social aspects. So that's your mastery prime. So once you're in mastery or mastery prime, the drive which takes upwards or downwards is to the next layer is the drive or need for affection or love. So if you're on the mastery layer and you have this need for affection, then if you remove this affection, if you don't localize to any particular race or nationality or gender or your education or any of those tribes, and then not even with time, right? Whether you're born today or during the time of Ramanujan or any of those, then you kind of have develop a universal love, and what I call the ultra affiliation layer. They reach an ultra affiliation layer. Now, this ultra affiliation layer is, like I said, is characterized by affiliation to a very broader group, which spans the entire universe and entire time and all the contexts there is. You can be rich, poor, sinner, saint. You could be a good person or you could be a criminal. Doesn't matter. So there's no discrimination here, right? And that's the universal love state. And the layer is called ultra affiliation layer. Now, the next layer corresponding to the ultra affiliation is the ultra affiliation prime. If you're in the mastery layer and you still, have this need for affection, but then you are localizing to a particular group, let's say whites, then probably you affiliate with a white supremacist group. Your religion, probably you're a religious fundamental group you can join, or like conspiracy theory groups, something like that. So you kind of identify with a group, and so if you see very clearly, if you go upwards, your scope increases, and if you go downwards, scope decreases to the extent that the next three layers is going to be programmed where you don't have any sense of free will. you're going to be programmed in the narrow domain you're boxed in. Now, so like I said, ultra affiliation, the corresponding layer is ultra affiliation prime. And then if you add extreme curiosity to this upwards from what I call the ultra affiliation layer, you end up in a layer called wisdom layer. So, but not only that, you need to have curiosity, but you must realize that, just like you're objective enough to the degree that you think that you understand that you're a small speck in the big scheme of things, humanity, not just you. Earlier levels said you are small, but the humanity itself is small, and evolution is using humanity. Then you've reached the wisdom layer. However, if you're in the wisdom, if you're in the ultra affiliation layer, such as ultra affiliation prime layer, such as a white supremacist group or a flat earther, then you achieve a lot of curiosity, accomplish or accumulate a lot of knowledge, and that turns to wisdom prime, because you become a flat earther, saying you're very, very convinced that the world is not, world is flat, literally, not figuratively, literally. And then you look at literature to convince yourself that the world is indeed flat. You'll not believe there are thousands of people around the world who subscribe to these phenomenon that the world is flat, or the climate change is not science. They believe that it's all made up and stuff like that. So that's fundamentalism, leads to wisdom or wisdom prime layers. Now, if one person has reached a stage, after that, if you see that the force takes you up or down, the program in the case of downward descent, ascent would be, it's going to be unprogrammed, which takes you. So you're kind of unprogramming. There's no sort of programs upwards. There is total programming downwards. So we'll talk about the next three layers. So these are what I call the programming / unprogramming layers. So, like I said, if you're in wisdom, then you have extreme discipline. Then you achieve a layer called supreme performance layer. So, for instance, samurai warriors today can slice a flying bullet, using their sword, flying, really flying. You can't even see that kind of reaction time. So that's possible by extreme discipline. So supreme performance, or the Yoga Sutra calls it the Ritambara Prajna, or the Upanishads calls it Turiya, is achieved when you have this ultimate awareness and discipline. And the Yoga Sutra also calls it the siddhis, the different powers you get. It details a lot of powers one can get when you reach that supreme performance stage. Now, when you go down the rabbit hole, which is a supreme performance prime, how will that play out? So there's a gentleman a year and a half back who's a flat earther. He's 61 years old. He was saying that flat earth is real, and then for several years he built in his backyard a jetpack, so that he can go up and prove that it's flat earth. So what happens is he did it on his own in his backyard. First he failed, he tried again, and he succeeded in launching himself up, but he lost his life in his process. So you need extreme discipline to actually pull it together, even though it's narrow and it's in a kind of fallacious in the lower realms, but still, nevertheless, you need that kind of the same level of supreme performance. This is also in the lower level, supreme performance prime. Like I said, if you are in the wisdom prime stage and you have extreme discipline, you would achieve that layer, supreme performance prime. Now, supreme performance prime is a layer, also, populated by, murderers, serial killers. It's not like a killer who did, acutely, but chronically. He's just methodically, he kills and gets away. They are in the supreme performance prime. They are equal to the, the samurai warriors up in the supreme performance layer, up topmost, the second layer from top. Now, like you see that there are two kinds of evil. I want to talk about it. One is called the acute evil, another is called the chronic evil. Just like you can have an illness, which is acute, which is a infection, that's called acute, meaning it just happens, it's an event. Chronic is, chron means time. Chronic illness can happen like diabetes or, heart disease. This happens because you probably didn't eat well or exercise and, you have some condition, etc., etc. All of these lead to chronic conditions. So evil could be, evil could be acute, meaning I don't have the capacity to contain my rage in traffic and go and kill people, and that's acute evil. It's evil nevertheless, but it's acute. Whereas these serial killers are not acute; they are chronic, meaning they're programmed into doing that, right? So they have far more. Actually, the other interesting thing is that the acute evil, the persons who inflict acute evil might not have impulse control, but the person who's inflicting chronic evil, such as bombing a place, doing like serial murder, rape, etc., which requires planning and discipline, etc., they have phenomenal impulse control, like the samurai warrior, except that they're narrowed down to a domain, right? So we have two mirror images of, like I said, supreme performance and supreme performance prime, and then we come to the last, pair of layers. So you have pairs, like I said. One that up above is called the Satyaloka, and we call it the enlightenment layer. Let's say a person is in supreme performance layer, and then he practices for a long time, then he's going to eventually reach the enlightenment layer. Nothing else is needed. You just need to practice, right? In the case of, once you reach the enlightenment layer, then you no longer see that you're different from anything else. You're connected with everything else around you. This is called moksha or nirvana or kaivalya in moksha in Hinduism, nirvana in Buddhism, or kaivalya in Yoga Sutra. So this is the ultimate goal of most, not just religions, but must be the goal of human development. That's ultimate, right? Where you not only have supreme performance, you are one with everything else. So you're not distinct, right? So your self is totally dissolved, right? But if you go down the path from supreme performance prime and you practice for a long time, then you get into a dark zone called the enlightenment prime zone. So again, the prime is the opposite of non-prime. So enlightenment prime zone is, or dark zone is inhabited by, by characterized by practice, right? You're in the supreme performance prime, and you are practicing. Uh, you're now. No, here is the thing. You're when you're in the supreme performance prime zone, you do stuff mechanically without regard to whether it is right or wrong. You want to do it, you will do it. You want to kill someone, you will kill it. But you will escape. You will think that yourself is still there, right? And the last one would be the suicide bombers, not the mercenaries, though those are unfortunate. The suicide bombers who really do it for their, really believe and do it, belong to the dark zone or the Patala Loka, where you don't have any sense of self. They are like the Buddha, except they're diametrically opposite. They are full of self, and they have, not even self, they have given to the program totally, that they are willing to kill millions of people by taking the plane and hijacking it on the on a building, right? So, or they can do suicide bombing, etc. All of these now don't even care about themselves anymore, because the program took over so much, and they're so narrow to their program, that they are kind of in the zone called Patala. And the equivalent one is the Buddha, the mirror pair. The other up, the topmost layer is the enlightenment layer. So there are totally 13 layers. From 14, we compressed 2 layers in the one of the 2 layers in the bottom region, bottom segment, and called it 1. And therefore, there are 6 pairs of layers and a ground zero. So that's the Moa model, which could be used for development for, So this helps you understand good and evil. And like I said, evil has 2 things, 2 components, chronic as well as acute. So, and therefore you can model it, you can have interventions. Later papers can help interventions. How do you progress, right? So let's say if somebody did a heinous crime, right? It could be acute evil, or, he might be put in jail for 10 years, 20 years, or life, or whatever. Now, what's the point? You're just going to lock him up, and then after that, if you're going to release him in society, it's likely that he's going to repeat it again and again, right? So you've not changed him other than lock him up and provide him food and shelter and clothing and hygiene, etc. But you've not changed him. And therefore, this gives this model, Loka model, can be developed and can provide insights to, reforming the prison system and making it better, because it's been the same. Putting under the bars is behind the bars has been the norm for the past over thousands of years, right? But we can be more sophisticated than gross way of just pushing them behind some bars. We are now making them, useful, productive members of society when they come out. And also, if you understand evil, you know what to do with them to make them progress, or we can even, help the society move up the members of society move up. So that's the Loka model.